What's up? Today we're going to be talking about one of the most important parts of any hand-to-hand practice, and that is how to take a photo of yourself for Instagram before you fall down out of your handstand. We're going to be talking about the hand-to-hand grip. If you already have a hand-to-hand practice, there is definitely information here that will be useful to you. We have a saying in England that goes, even the best cup of tea sometimes needs more milk. If you don't have a hand-to-hand practice, this video is going to be super useful to you because there'll be a ton of information that you've never heard before. We're going to cover what makes a good grip, how to make a good grip, the potential mistakes you can make, and how to correct those mistakes. What we're looking for is a consistent angle that's not too steep and not too flat. That tends to be about 45 degrees. And the angle we're looking at when we check is this angle here at the back of the wrist. We're looking for as much contact across the hand as possible, and we're looking for strength and stability in that connection. The easiest way to practice making a good grip and getting used to what that feels like is by making the webbing in between the index finger and your thumb really taut. Then you press that part of your hands together, you rotate round and pull down into the grip and the 45-degree angle. From there you want to make sure you're pulling down with your fingers on the back of the wrists in order to lock that connection in place. The first mistake can be made when you go to grip your partner. You don't want to choke up on the hand. This normally happens when you're trying really hard to connect your palms as well as possible. You want to feel an even distribution of pressure between the thumb side of your hand and the outside of your hand. The most common mistake is that people make a good grip, but as soon as we begin to put weight into it, we push the grip too steep. It's a natural reaction from the body that wants to push back to resist the load we've just placed on it. The alternative is that we go too flat. Too flat is not as bad as too steep because we can hold a handstand on the floor perfectly fine and the floor is completely flat. What is bad if it's too flat because there is zero tension or support in the hands and there's no support on the back of the flyer's wrist. So bases, you need to make sure you're pushing your fingers into their wrists, but don't confuse this with pushing the wrist. Out of all of the options, too steep is by far the worst. Having the wrist too steep has such a huge negative effect on the flyer's ability to hold a good handstand. So it's important that we make the grip first, we apply all the necessary tension, and then we aim to keep that tension there. Don't try and find your grip suddenly when you're already up in a handstand, because by that point it's too late and the damage is done. As much as possible we want to create stability from the very beginning. It's quite difficult to go from a bad position and find a good position. It's much easier to stay in a good position if we're already there. The other mistake I see people making a lot of the time is not squeezing hard enough. People always talk about you need a soft hand when you do hand-to-hand, and this is something I completely disagree with. A number of things happen when you squeeze your hand. Firstly, an active muscle is a hard muscle. When you grip, your hand becomes physically harder. You become a much more stable platform, or you become a much more stable object if you're a flyer. Secondly, there's this principle called the law of irradiation, and it was discovered by this British scientist, classic, this guy with the most British name in the entire world, Sir Charles Scott Sherrington. Essentially what it means is that if you don't grip hard, the rest of the muscles down the chain are more likely to be inactive or inhibited. The muscles in the rest of the body have an easier time activating if the primary muscles involved in the movement are engaged. Thirdly, it creates stability within the hand. The stronger I hold onto something, the less able it is to move within my hand. So if I'm squeezing it really tight, it's harder for it to go anywhere. So it's not going to fall out, it's not going to slip, it's just going to stay there in a handstand till I say so. Fourthly, I see acro yoga people all the time complaining about sore wrists. They forever have their wrists taped. And I had a sneaking suspicion that was confirmed last night by Jen Crane at Cirque Physio that when you use a soft grip and you don't activate the muscles, most of the force, instead of going into the muscle, goes into the joints, tendons and ligaments of the wrist. Over time, all of that loading causes damage that then ends up in people complaining about sore wrists. Let's put all of this into practice. Bases, you're going to lie down, put your arms into extension and pull your shoulder blades down into the floor. Flyers, you're going to just do a tuck sit on their hands. Before we put any weight in the hands though, make sure you find the grip, fix that grip and then load the weight. If you're confident, you can go straight there. If it's a little new to you, you can go via the knees. You put one foot on the thigh, other foot on the thigh, and then slowly transfer the weight back to the hands. Now, try going too flat, and then pushing it back to where it should be, and then try going too pointed and see what happens. Play around with the angle of the wrist to find where it's comfortable. Having said that, I strongly recommend that you don't point it, and by strongly recommend, I mean don't do it. If you already have a kind of confident hand-to-hand practice, feel free to try what we just did with the tuck sit, but in your lower hand to hand. So jump up to your handstand and then play with the angle of the wrist and see where it feels comfortable, and see what happens when you go too pointed in your handstand, because I guarantee you, you'll fall off. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the hand-to-hand grip in a nutshell. The next video we're going to make, we're going to look at the fundamentals of hand-to-hand, we're going to look at jumping into a hand-to-hand, we're going to look at jumping into handstand, we're going to look at exercises to help you do all of those things, because you wouldn't be watching these videos if you already do those things. So stick with me, stick with Tess, stick with Josh, stick with the skeleton. We got you. Peace.